No, sorry. First of all, I have to say that I listened to Deputy Kern's contribution, and obviously she's put a lot of work and detailed work into the bill, and I commend her for that. And I have to say that, like any bill, I have no doubt it can be improved. And I hope, Minister, as the bill goes through the House, you'll be open to suggestions for building on the basis of the bill, to seeing how it can be improved as it goes along. And on the other hand, I think it is time that we actually got ahead and brought in the legislation. I think the second thing that we have to be more adapted in the House generally is that when we bring in legislation, if it's found that there are flaws in it, and every piece of legislation, particularly new legislation, there are obviously going to be issues that arise fairly rapidly, that it shouldn't take 10 years to come in with amendments that are necessary in bills. I saw that with a number of bills over the years, and it's a terribly bad habit. Now, the third issue that I always have a conflicted view on, or not so much a conflicted view on, but I think that we need a balance. The word independent, we want everything independent. Now, I know where people are coming from, but when people get what they ask for, they're often very frustrated also. Because when you say independent, we often mean independent of the Oireachtas, of the Minister and of the Oireachtas and of the people. Independent of the people? So the relationship between a department and any agency is a very delicate one. And of course we have to recognise, no matter what structures you put in place, humans will always find a way of doing it very well or not doing it so well, and sometimes doing it very badly. But I think it is very, very important that we don't wind up in the farcical situation that I seem to hit against every week, that you ask a question and you're told, well, that's the NTA, I have nothing to do with that. That's TII, I have nothing to do with that. That's CRU, I have nothing to do with that. I was asked a simple question today, was it intended, like we did with the rural broadband, to put water into every house in Ireland? Just piped water, rather than people depending on wells. About 10% of houses need piped water. Oh, I was told that's the matter for CRU. It's not, it's a matter for the Oireachtas. So I think it is important that the right balance is struck between the Minister and the powers, and the right of the regulator to get on with the job and do it efficiently. And as I said, I think that has to be debated in detail, but it has to be a balanced debate. I remember writing into it, now it wasn't analogous because it wasn't a regulator, but in the Youth Ross bill, I obviously couldn't tell them to put a factory in a particular spot, but I could say I wanted certain industrial policies pursued in the Gaeltacht, and I did. For example, that the most indigenous resource in the Gaeltacht was the language. And therefore I instructed that 30% of the funding was to go to language-based industries. But I couldn't say where or the detail of it. So I had it written in the Act that I could give any general instruction I wanted. And I would be answerable to the House if I abused that at the time. So I do think that this issue of, not putting it so far away from the Oireachtas that the people don't have any say in it anymore is something that we need to get right. Now, I'm really, really welcome this bill. I first suggested this back in 2014 when I was spokesperson in agriculture for Fianna Fáil. I was looking at this very, very vexed question, and the Agriculture Committee at the time did a lot of work on this because I had raised it in the Agriculture Committee as to where the villains were. And there are issues, there are major issues in the supply chain in terms of pricing and so on, and cartels and all sorts of arrangements. But was it the big multiples? Were they really dictating the price, or was it the processors and so on? And I visited the European Union at the time a number of times, and we did a lot of research, and there was good help given to me at the time. And it became clear that, for example, the French were well ahead of us in at least analysing where the problem was, because you can't solve any problem if you don't know where to get the information. And it became obvious that they were well ahead in legislative terms in getting this information and forcing the information. The second thing is, it can have quite a chastening effect on people if they know you're watching them. It's like the CCTV camera. If they know you're watching them, it can have quite a good effect. So I do welcome this bill. Mas Mála's myth. It's very, very late coming, but I do hope that it does have an effect. I would just like to join with Deputy Harry Kearns in relation to the issue of the big boats. It is a scandal the way the fishing industry is organised. And what we're doing in our society generally right across the board is corporatising everything. Ownership of houses, ownership of the boats, now ownership of the land for forestry. We're corporatising our society very fast. I don't know where the influence is it the European influence or whatever? But I'm still old-fashioned enough to believe that if you want a stable society, diffuse ownership, i.e. that as many people as possible own something, is the way to stability and social and economic stability in your society. It mightn't give you the exponential growth, but it will give you a much more important thing in any human society, and that's stability. And therefore, I think it is important that as part of this, that there be a clear philosophy that what we want to do is keep the basic structures of Irish farming viable, and that we want to have a diffuse ownership of land rather than a few corporates slowly but surely, beginning to more and more hold huge tracts of land. And as I said in the Dáil yesterday, we took a long time to break that down. We don't want to go back to where we started. Good morning.